My name is John H., and I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a drug addict and a compulsive gambler. In this Code Blue Big Book Study in Action seminar, we're going to go through the recovery section of the Big Book line by line, and we're going to do the action that our book tells us we must do to recover from the seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. This is based on the Canadian method used by the Golden Slippers, but I also borrow a lot of information from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes, as I feel their interpretation carries so much depth and weight. Sometimes I use their material verbatim, so don't get angry at me. Sometimes they can say things a lot better than me. This action and study is designed so that you can follow along in a 4th edition Big Book. Have your pen and highlighter ready. I don't claim to be any kind of big book guru or top 10 spiritualist. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a group of my heroes, some recovered alcoholics, took me through the book 5 years ago and saved my life. There's also some paperwork that you can download. Hopefully I'll get that online as well. Some from Joe and Charlie and some from the Golden Slippers. Please forgive any mistakes, errors, or misquotes you may detect. I'm sure there are many, for once again, I'm just a simple drunk trying to help other folks as I was helped myself. Thanks for listening. Good evening, everybody. I'm John, alcoholic.
Hey, John.
During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now deceased, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the Big Book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook, Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who've done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook, using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been in effect left off at step 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic book, we might not recover. These study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with a set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Amen. All right, guys, thanks for coming out in a little bit of the storm that we have. I think on the radio they said that most of it passed, so we're just going to get some rain from now on. At least that's what the weatherman said. Weatherman's the only job you can have, and you can be wrong a lot and still keep your job. All right, guys, thanks for coming. This is, I'll get this out of here. I remember the first time I went through Code Blue, the fella up here said, "This is where the rubber hits the road." You know, I wanted to get up and hit the guy. I'm like, yeah, really? Okay. Basically, and this happens at most Code Blues, and this happens when I'm sponsoring men on a one-on-one basis. For some reason, when we get to step 4, it has a tendency to scare people, and that's when people tend to disappear, is right around the step, the first action step, and this is where the healing really begins, right? So, you know, when should we do step 4? Well, our book says that our decision is a vital and crucial step, but it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. So the book tells us that we do step 4 immediately after step 3. I've heard some people, and I've even heard people that have sobered up in AA, and they tell people, well, you're not anywhere close to being ready for step 4. And when I hear that, I want to cringe. Because, in the old days, they would take people through these steps rather quickly in a matter of weeks. And because if they didn't, people had a tendency to relapse, because this is where the healing gets better. And I think the main reason people don't want to do their fourth step is they're afraid. And I think a lot of that blame can be placed on older members. They say, you wait till you get to that fourth step, you're going to really see some stuff. And we play King on the Mountain and we scare these people, right? But there's really nothing to fear. I want to tell you guys, there's nothing to fear when you do the fourth step according to the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous. There's absolutely nothing to fear, and there's absolutely everything to gain. I think for me, it was somewhere in the middle of doing my fourth step at the Code Blue that I went through that my real obsession to drink, because I was thinking about drinking every day and taking pills and doing drugs and being angry. I think I started to get some relief right in the middle of doing the fourth step. So I think fear is the big reason why people don't want to do it. Another reason people don't do the fourth step is confusion. Right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do this step according to the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and we do that. There's nothing whatsoever to fear, and we're going to try to make sure that it's as simple to understand as possible. One of the guys that I learned from told me that the first time he did his fourth step, he wrote a 92-page biography. I was born here, I did this, I moved there, I did this, I drank, she left me here, I went to jail there. And all he did was write a biography, and his sponsor looked at it and said, "Not too pretty, is it?" And he said, "No." His sponsor threw it in the garbage, and he said, "You'll never have to be that way again." And the guy learned absolutely nothing from writing out his history, right? So Bill tells us that we are going to do a moral inventory. And it's not a list of dirty, rotten, nasty things. If it was going to be a list of dirty, rotten, nasty things, Bill would have said do an immoral or amoral inventory. But he didn't. He said do a fearless and searching moral inventory. And when you look up moral in the dictionary, it simply means truth. So what they want us to do is look at the truth of things as they really are, right? The right and wrong of any given situation. And it's a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And we got to remember, he does compare it to a business. And we're going to read the book in a little bit. We're the only stock and trade that we have in this business of staying sober. And nobody can make us drink. I'll admit that some people can make us awfully thirsty, but we decide if we're going to drink or not. Nobody else does that. So what we're going to try to do in the fourth step is we're going to try to find the flawed thinking processes that block us off from God. Right? Because when we make a decision in step 3, we ask God to direct us. But if our minds are filled with damaged and unsaleable goods, right, which are resentments, fears, and guilt, shame, and remorse, with a head full of that crap, God cannot get in. When we are able to get rid of them, God can enter our head. Let's see here. I'm just going to talk a little bit. I got this from Charlie of the Joe and Charlie Big Book Study. He has a wonderful illusion where he compares his head to a 7-Eleven store. And I related to this 100%. He said, there's not much in my head, never has been, right? It's a little 7-Eleven store. But on one side of the store, he's got a display case. And that display case is filled with resentments. Right? Damn him, damn her, I'll show them, my boss can't get away with that, I'll get even, right? They're full of that, and when they're full of that, God cannot get in. On the other side of our little 7-Eleven head, we've got a little file cabinet, and that file cabinet is filled with fears. Oh my God, what's she going to do when she finds out about this? Oh my God, I think this time I'm going to get fired. Oh my God, I'm not, there's my car, there's a big dent in it. Oh my God, what are they going to do? When we're thinking about stuff like that, God cannot get past that crap either, right? On the other side of our 7-Eleven head, we've got a storeroom, and that storeroom is filled with guilt, shame, and remorse. right? I'm the worst son ever. I can't believe I did that to my mother. Oh my God, I cheated on her. I'm the worst person. And we beat ourselves up. And so when we've got a head full of guilt, shame, and remorse like that, God can't get in past that stuff either, right? So if I want God to direct my thinking, I'm going to have to do something about the resentments, something about the fears, and something about the guilt and shame so that He can get in. Right? So when we do the 4th step, this is just a huge part. This is what saved my life. If I do my part, if I follow these simple instructions, we're going to see that we can get rid of a lot of the resentments, a lot of the fears, and even a lot of the guilt, shame, and remorse. Even though we're going to deal with a lot of that in step 9, just talking about it with somebody gives us quite a bit of relief as well. Now, if I do not do this, if I do not do this 4th and this 5th step, I can't get rid of that stuff. And God cannot get into my head to direct me. It's that simple. So this is the first big action step. And let us go now to the book. We left off on page 64. On page 64. And we're going to look at I guess it's the second paragraph there. Right after we should have written stop week 7. And basically, let's just go up. I mean, it says our liquor was but a symptom, right? I mean, I came in here. I thought all I had to do was get rid of the booze, and I'll be okay. And remember, I told you guys when I got rid of the booze, and I was going to a meeting every single night. And at 6 months sober, I was stark raving sober, and I was thinking about drinking myself to death or putting a bullet in my head because there were many, many other things that were wrong with me, and it became even more apparent to me once I got rid of the liquor because the liquor had been masking it and helping me to cope with it. So we are on the second paragraph there. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. Okay, this was step 4. Okay, highlight this was step 4. And now he's going to make the allegory to the business. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory, highlight, is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. Highlight the next sentence. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. Right? So right next to that whole paragraph, write the word truth. And then that's all we're going to try to do when we do our 4th step is we're going to try to see the truth about how we think and how we look at things and how that affects us. One object is to disclose the damaged or unsaleable goods to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values, right? So basically, Bill is saying if you own a store and you've got a bunch of ladies' purses from the 1960s, you got them on special, right? And they're taking up half your store, but nobody is buying those purses. And you're telling yourself, well, those ladies just don't know what's good for them. The price on those purses is so good, they should be buying them. Nobody's buying them. They're taking up valuable space in your store. You're paying interest on the money that you bought with them, and they're not moving. You've got no incoming money. Those purses, you're fooling yourself about the value, and those purses are going to knock you right out of business. I mean, if you got rid of those purses and you put something that started selling in place of it, you're going to be able to save your business, right? So he compares it to a store or a business. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. Circle the word honestly, and then highlight the next sentence. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. So highlight that little sentence. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Okay? And then after common manifestations, let's please write, we take selfish and self-centered to extremes. We alcoholics do that. We take selfish and self-centered to extremes. And we're going to look at that because remember, last week we talked about the basic instincts in life that are God-given that we need to survive. But sometimes we alcoholics overdo. We take selfish and self-centered to extremes. Okay, so we're going to highlight the next sentence. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. That's a pretty powerful sentence right there. Right next to it, let's write in Latin, or a little arrow from resentment, and write in Latin, refeel. It means to refeel. Anytime you see the re in front of something, it means to do again. And I believe the root of the Latin word is senti, or something of that nature. So resentment means to refeel something. From it stem all forms of spiritual dis-ease. Put a little line between dis and ease, right? It's disease, but it's actually dis-ease. You guys all know that feeling in your chest that you just, things aren't right, and you're nervous, you're worried, you're angry, you don't have an answer, you think you got to be able to control things, and that feeling in your chest, just everything is tight and right? It's dis-ease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, underline that, mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick, and underline, we have been spiritually sick too. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Highlight that sentence, and then also highlight the next one. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Okay, so this is very, very important, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, why we've got to put everything on paper. But he's giving us specific instructions right here. So right across from in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Write fourth step instruction. Actually, write four-step instructions, and because we're going to get some more. We're going to get to the bottom of the page, we're going to get some more instructions, and then we're going to look what Bill did. So, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. That's an instruction. Okay. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. That's another instruction. We asked ourselves why we were angry. That's another instruction. In most cases, we found it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. Okay? Now, at the bottom of page 64, let's write ourselves a note. Must work on this, stay diligent. And what I was told to do, and it seemed to work out for me, my sponsor said, John, you just work on this. And he had me work on it as we were going through Code Blue, right? So he said, work on it 15 or 20 minutes a night and you'll be fine. Now, for some reason, when I was doing my fourth step, I like to find excuses to do anything else other than work on my fourth step. And it's not that I found things particularly painful. Guys, I don't know exactly why it was, but I got to tell you, I start working on it like, oh my God, my bathroom is dirty. So I go and I clean the bathroom, right? I'm cleaning my toilet rather than working on my fourth step. So this is something, and I'm just asking you to work 15 or 20 minutes on it. If you follow the instructions in the big book, this is something that we should be able to be done with our fourth step in about 3 weeks. That's our goal, is to be done with it in 3 weeks and to actually set up with our sponsor giving our fifth step. And I found that even if people have done a fourth step before, why not do another one? Because I see people in AA that are sober 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, and I look at them and I can tell that fear is starting to creep back into their lives. That this angst, and resentment at family members, all these things are starting to creep back into their life. And I don't care if you're 10 years sober, 15 or 20, if you redo these steps thoroughly by the big book, you are going to get better. These steps have a tendency to meet us wherever we're at. Wherever we're at, if we rework these things, we're going to get better. And I don't care if you've done 3, 4 steps. I mean, you do another one, following instructions from somebody, you're going to get even better, right? Every time I go through this Code Blue, I do at least 2 of these a year. I kind of redo this stuff, and it just renews me. I get to be reborn again every time I do it. So we want to stay diligent. We want to try to work on this. On our grudge list, let's see here. At the top of page 65, we're going to write something else, and I'm going to explain it next week. Self-centered fear is the chief activator of our defects. right? This week we're going to run some columns on resentments. Self-centered fear is the chief activator of our defects, right? And when we cover the fear next week, that'll be a little bit more clear to you. Self-centered fear is the chief activator of our defects, right? In other words, John is worried about John. He's worried about something in John, and when John worries about himself above all else, he tends to lash out at people, he tends to be worried, he tends to hurt people, right? That's when I put myself, I'm worried that I'm going to lose something, or I'm not going to get something that I've got. I don't get something I think I deserve. So self-centered fear. You know, I bought a house about 4 years ago in Minnetonka here, and every now and then I catch myself, you know, it's like, oh, this happened, you know, and I'll let my mind run for a couple of minutes. My mind will run through it, and it ends, I lost my house, right? When something stupid happens at work, I play it out, and next thing you know, in my head, I'm losing my house. And you know what? Even if I did lose my house, big deal. You know, I'm still alive. I'll be living somewhere else. I'll still have my friends. I'll still have the important things in my life. But we can let self-centered fear activate our defects, and I can get into real trouble if I do something dishonest or I hurt people because of this self-centered fear. But we'll talk more about that next week. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Highlight. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which had been interfered with? Highlight that sentence, and next to it write third column. Third column. And I'm sorry, guys, we got to go back to page 64. And let's go from the bottom of the page, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go up 5 lines where it says we listed people, institutions, or principles. Right next to that, write column 1. Column 1. Okay, and that's this sheet right here. I am not giving you anything that is not in the big book. So, guys, if we take this sheet that you have, and if we fold over column 4, I fold over column 4. Right now, I have the blank sheet of what we're going to cover with Bill right here. This is page 65 in the blank form. So we're going to figure out how to do what Bill says. So column 1, we listed the people that we're angry with or resentful with. And then above, we asked ourselves why we were angry. That's column 2, right? And then on the next page, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal sex relations? That's column 3. And we're going to talk about column 4 in a little bit. Let's see where we are here. Okay, so we're going to look what Bill did. Bill only listed 4 people. So he listed, I am resentful at Mr. Brown. Now, when we do this, what we're going to do is we're going to do column 1 first. We're going to list everybody we're angry with, because sometimes when we try to work across the page, our brain tilts. So we're going to list everybody we're angry with. Then we're going to do column 2. What is the cause of that resentment? Right? And then we're going to do column 3 on all of these last. So, Mr. Brown. Now, the reason he's angry at Mr. Brown, his attention to my wife. He told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get my job at the office. Yeah, I'd be pissed too. Right? So now, what is that affecting? It's affecting, his attention to his wife is affecting sex relations. His self-esteem, with fear in parentheses. Told my wife of my mistress, that's going to affect his sex relations, right? His wife finds out he's got a mistress, that he's not going to be getting sex from the wife, right? Brown may get my job at the office. Self-esteem and security are affected. Now he's also angry at Mrs. Jones. She's a nut, she snubbed me, right? She committed her husband for drinking. They did that, they might be coming to me next. He's my friend, she's a gossip. So this is affecting personal relationships and self-esteem and fear. My employer, just about everybody's pissed at their boss. Unreasonable, unjust, overbearing, threatens to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account. How dare he? Right? Now that's affecting his self-esteem and his security. And he's angry at his wife. Misunderstands and nags. Likes Mr. Brown. Wants the house put in her name, right? So that's affecting his pride, his personal and sex relations, his security and fear. This is exactly what we just read, right? So we went back through our lives. Highlight. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. and circle honesty. That's the second time that word's come up. Now, I realize that a lot of us, when we first sober up, it's kind of hard to be completely honest with ourselves. So all we're going to do is we're going to try to be as honest as we can, right? That's all we're going to do. So at the bottom of the page, let's write everything that's given me a bad taste in mouth since birth. These are resentments, because remember, resentments are about the past. Everything that's given me a bad taste in my mouth since birth. So if this is the first time that you've done a 4-step, you betcha, I want you to go back through your life and you think about some things that might have happened to you when you were a child. Maybe your father didn't come to your sporting events. Maybe, there can be all kinds of things that happen, but I want you to do that from birth. Now, if you've done a few 4th steps, then all I want you to do is write down the things that are still bothering you, because even me, who's done several of these things, I still have some resentments that bother me that are new, right? And I want to get them on paper. I want to see the cause of them. I want to see how they're affecting me, and I want to see what my part is, and ultimately I want to get rid of them, because I don't like that tightness in my chest, that worry, that feeling that it just that tends to control my life and make it very unpleasant. So bad taste in mouth since birth. So if the first time you've done one, we're going to do everything. If you've done a few of them, we're just going to do the resentments that you think are still bothering you today, or some new ones. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. Okay, right next to that sentence off to the left, write victims. Victims, right? When I came into these rooms, man, it was everybody else's fault. I was getting the shaft by everybody. The cops got me, my boss got me, my old girlfriends, my family members, everybody was taking advantage of old John. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. Okay, I'm going to go back to some of my notes a little bit. So again, guys, resentment. Resentment means to re-feel. So I'm going to explain this a little bit. Let's say that I'm at work, and I'm talking with another salesperson, and my boss comes over and yells at me and says, you're being complacent. You should be on the phone following up. Your sales are, and he just goes off on me, right? Now, at the time that he does that, absolutely, it's okay for me to be a little bit upset when he does it, right? But a resentment happens to me when an hour later, I walk into the next room and I relive him yelling at me again. I get home from work that night, and I walk through the door, and somebody there, one of my family members, wants to talk with me, but inside my head, I'm reliving my boss yelling at me, and I'm thinking, that dirty son of a bitch, how dare he do that? And I'm reliving this situation in my head over and over again. And, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not always completely honest with myself. So when I replay this resentment each time in my head, what my boss did to me was a little bit worse. What I did becomes a little bit less, and the harm that he caused me gets a little bit deeper. So when I replay these resentments over and over long enough, I can say to myself, I was just standing there doing nothing and I got attacked, right? So, and we do this with everything. We do it with our significant others. That damn cop that had it out for me, he knew I was in the bar drinking. He was waiting around the corner just waiting for me to give me the DWI. That dirty son, that judge, he treated me, and we replay these over and over. And man, we waste so much of our time. And when I play a resentment enough times in my head, it comes back at me as self-resentment, right? How can I let these people take advantage of us, right? And then I start to hate myself for letting it happen, and then it turns into the sickest of all things, which is self-pity, right? We go over at home at night, we sit down, we play it over in our head, we blame them, and we make ourselves sick. right? And, towards the end of my drinking and even in my early sobriety, when I would go out into the world and nobody would pick on me, then all of a sudden what I would do is I would start to think, they're thinking something bad about me, right? I mean, it was a bad day if nobody did something to me, because then I wouldn't have anything that I couldn't be the victim about, right? So I know that son of a bitch is thinking something bad about me, right? So let's see here. The other thing that's going to become apparent when we are replaying the resentments in our head, we can only see one of them at a time. Right? That's why we've got to write them down. When we write them down, I mean, I know, guys, I was amazed because I didn't think I really had a lot of resentments, but I'll tell you this, when I was done, I saw that I had over 100 resentments. And those are kind of just the ones that got me, right? So, after they talk about Brown, it says that we've got to get it down on paper, we've got to get it down on black and white. So, what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to run... Oh, let's see here. Okay, so we're going to eventually realize in column 1, right, that we aren't necessarily upset with the people. When we get to column 2, we're going to understand that's what these people did to me that got me upset, right? So these 2 columns. When we get all these resentments down, we're going to see how angry we are, and we're going to see, my God, you bet it blocks me off from God. We're going to learn that it's not them that I resent, but what they've done to me. And then column 3, what we're going to do is we're going to look for patterns. And column 3 are threats against our basic instincts of life. And we're going to try to look for patterns that get us angry, right? And that's going to become apparent when we run some columns here. Now, funny enough, if my basic instincts, right, we talked last week about the social instinct, the security instinct, and the sex instinct. If I have those somewhat under control to the level that God intended, and I have a good relationship with God, my boss at work can do just about anything to me. He can do just about anything to me, and it's going to roll off my back. And what I'm going to say to myself is, you know what? I bet his boss called up and yelled at him, or he had to deal with that customer. You know, the poor guy, he's having a really bad day. I understand why he lashed out at me, right? Now, here's the thing. If my basic instincts are not under control, and I do not at this particular time have a good relationship with God, with my Creator, He can do the same exact thing to me, and I can get madder than hell. The same exact thing that rolled off my back, this 2 weeks later, my face gets red, I blow up, and then I go in the next room, and so it's when we do these things, we're going to learn how to keep these instincts under control, and we're going to learn some prayers that are going to help us so we don't have to get angry and relive these little hurts and harms that people do to us over and over again. So again, column 1, who are we angry with? We're going to see that it's not them, but what they've done to us, and we're going to see that it's not even what they did to us, but it's how we react based on our 3 basic instincts here. So what we're going to do now, guys, is Eric is going to help us out. I'm going to run one column first, but then I'm going to have Eric. The last 10 years of my using, I did not have a significant other. Now that's why Eric's going to be very brave today. He's going to get up there and talk about his significant other. But what we're going to, and that's probably the number 1 that's going to be the top at everybody's list. A girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, ex-wife, ex-husband, whatever. That's probably going to be the number 1 offender on that list. So, this sheet right here, guys, this sheet is going to help us out. It's going to enable us to understand what all of this stuff that I wrote is. And again, this is exactly what Bill is talking about. We're not making up anything new here. So for you guys, Eric's going to run this one, but I'm going to let's see here. I'm going to run this one right here. My boss yelling at me, right? And I mean, I'm no angel. I do stuff, right? I do stuff that I step on people's toes all the time. So let's say that I'm dealing with a customer and there's people around, and all of a sudden my boss walks up and says, "I can't believe you did that. You screwed up. You shouldn't do that. And I'm here trying to close a deal or something, right? Now, of course, I'm a little upset at the time, but when I go into the next room and I relive this over and over again, we're going to see how it affects me. So I want to look at these definitions every time. So I'm standing around helping a customer. My boss comes up and yells, and maybe I did something to warrant him yelling at me, right? But that doesn't make what he does right. So my social instinct. Let's look at my definition sheet. Your natural tendencies or feelings from birth having to do with people as a group with interests in common. Okay, social instinct. So I'm going to put a little check mark next to each of these that him yelling at me affects. Self-esteem, what we think of ourselves, high or low. Well, him yelling at me and saying that I screwed up, yeah, that affects my self-esteem. Kaboom. Personal relationships. Our relations with other human beings and the world around us involves a third party. Do not use person from column 1, only others around us. Well, the people that hear him yelling at me are going to be affected by it, but also it's going to put me in such a bad mood that I'm talking with somebody an hour later, I'm reliving this, and I'm unable to do a good job and close that deal. So it's absolutely affecting my personal relationships too. Security instinct. Your natural tendencies or feelings of safety, freedom from danger or harm. Material, wanting money, property, clothing, housing, vehicles, etc. in order to be secure. Is my boss yelling at me when I'm trying to close this deal going to affect that? Goddamn right it is. Material. Boom. Right? Yeah, it's like, I can't believe it. I didn't close that deal. You came in, you stuck your nose in there, right? So yes, it affects that, right? Emotional. Based on our need for another person or persons. Some people tend to dominate and some are overly dependent. I mean, my emotional need, other people that I work with saw that happen? Absolutely. I mean, absolutely, it's affecting that. Sex instinct. Your natural tendencies regarding sex, our sex lives as accepted by society's God's principles, our own principles. Is it going to affect my acceptable sex relations? The only way I could say yes would be, and sometimes I can relive this and get so angry. I mean, if I did have a date later that night with somebody and I am reliving this thing in my head and I'm horrible company, it absolutely could affect my acceptable sex relations. Possibly, but I'll put a check there. If I'm not sure, maybe a question. But it's absolutely possible because when I let this thing, oops, I'm on the wrong one. When I let this thing affect me and I relive it over and over, it tends to affect every aspect of my life, right? Hidden sex relations are sex lives that are contrary to society, God's principles, our own principles. I mean, if I had a mistress and I treated her badly because I was feeling it could affect that, so possibly. Ambitions. Your plans or great desires, so this is the future. Social ambitions, your plans to gain acceptance, power, recognition, prestige. I mean, I'm thinking that yes, it could certainly affect that. Security, your plans to gain material wealth. Yeah, because, I had a customer there and he made me look foolish. Sexual ambitions, your plans regarding your sex lives, etc. Maybe, but I'm not gonna put anything here, right? So now let's go to the important part, right, which is the exact nature of my mistakes, my wrongs, my faults, mistakes, or shortcomings. So exact, accurate, methodical, correct. Nature, the essential characteristic of a thing. Wrong, acting, judging, believing. Fault, mistake, defect. Defect, lack of something necessary for completeness, same as shortcoming. So, let's see here. What's my part in this thing? Because remember, I'm reliving this little incident lasted 2 minutes, right? And I can be reliving it over and over for the next 2 weeks. And it's really screwing my life up. I'm literally spending hours reliving this little situation that I should have said, the poor fella's having a rough day and I should have just been able to forget about it, right? But I'll take it with me. So, what's my part? Selfish. Strictly material, property, money, housing. You don't mess with my, I was trying to close a deal. You don't mess with that, man. And it's quite possible that I might have done something prior to this to cause him to do that, right? Dishonest, to commit, to act out and out lies. When I'm playing myself the victim, I'm saying that I didn't do anything to have this coming to me, lying to myself, I'm going to put it. self-seeking. What I want matters more than what you want. My needs matter more than yours. My feelings or comfort comes first. He probably had something going on. I might have done something. He might have had a big customer complaint or something, and all I'm thinking about is what that guy did to me, right? Because I come first, so I'm self-seeking. Inconsiderate, did I fail to consider how they felt, their wants, their needs, their beliefs, and how I affected them? If I had done something, I certainly didn't think about it, and I didn't think about the fact that he might have just got yelled at by his boss because of something that I did or something that the other staff did, and that's why he was feeling that way. And I would not consider that. All I considered is that guy came after me. I'm a victim, right? So I didn't consider that, right? And even if I didn't do anything, I'm still inconsiderate of perhaps what put him in this particular mood. So I am going to turn it over to, and we're going to run that top one.